On a very hot day in August of 1994, my wife told me she was going down to the dairy Rite Aid to pick up a refill on her sinus medicine prescription. This is stuff you can buy over the counter these days, I believe. I had finished my writing for the day and offered to pick it up for her. She said thanks, but she wanted to get a piece of fish at the supermarket next door anyway. 2 birds with 1 stone and all that. She blew a kiss at me off the palm of her hand and went out. The next time I saw her, she was on TV. That's how you identify the dead here in Derry. No walking down a subterranean corridor with green tiles on the walls and long fluorescent bars overhead. No naked body rolling out of a hilly drawer on casters. You just go into an office marked private and look at the TV screen and say yep or nope. Bag of Bones is one of the few King books written in first person, and it's a very deep and thoughtful exploration of grief from the point of view of a writer, Mike Noolan. He is our main character, and he loses the 2 things he loves most in his life right in the first paragraph, which I just read. His wife, and although he doesn't know it right then, his ability to write. It's a bit dark humor of life when we think that not many years after this, it would be Tabitha King the one who would have faced that possibility when King had his terrible accident, from which he thankfully survived. However, while Mike is our narrator and main character, and it's his grief and pain what starts the ball rolling, what is interesting in Bag of Bones is not him. No. Once again, King surprises us, particularly with the reputation that some people had tried to give him online, by giving us a quite interesting and diverse cast of female characters, who are the ones who really matter in the story, and who are connected by a terrible thread created by men who came into their lives without really caring to understand them. I'm AdalisaZ, and today I want you all to come with me to the Sara Laughs cabin, where we can see that, in fiction, every character is a bag of bones. Bag of Bones was published in 1998, and it is the first book that King published with Scrivener, after leaving Viking, which had published all his novels all the way up to Desperation. By King's own admission, it's heavily influenced by Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, a 1938 Gothic novel which is about a young woman, which is never named, who names a rich widower, and then finds out that he and her new house are horribly haunted by the memory, and perhaps the very real ghost, of his first wife, Rebecca, who may or may not have been killed by her husband. Yeah, because that is going to be very good for the relationship. Hi honey, I have no name, you call me by the name of your old wife, and I think you killed her. Of course, inspiration doesn't mean plagiarism, and the similarities with Rebecca end pretty quickly. Yes, we have an old widower, Mike, and he meets a young woman, Mattie, with whom he falls in love with despite himself telling that the difference of age is too much for him. And yes, the house where he's living is very, very haunted. And there is also a horribly devoted housekeeper among the cast, and a lot of mystery surrounding Mike's wife's life right before she died, including her keeping the exact same secret that Rebecca was keeping from her husband before she died. But the way in which the situation happens and the plot of Bag of Bones itself is way different from Daphne du Maurier's book. Although I honestly recommend you also read Rebecca, it is a very haunting book that is also very misrepresented by the movie adaptations. Oh yeah, there is a miniseries for Bag of Bones, filmed and released in 2011. Despite having an amazing cast, including Pierce Brosnan as Mike Noolan, it unfortunately stripped the story down to the bare bones, no pun intended, and thus pretty much everything that made Bag of Bones a special story was completely lost, making it a very run-of-the-mill haunted house story. It respected some of the motivations for the characters and the motivations for the hauntings, but made them so clear-cut that you will not be blamed for leaving the story in the middle, not caring to see how it ended because it makes it look like every other old ghost story. The story. That is something that we need to talk right away because Bag of Bones has a very simple plot at first sight, but a very complicated story. How can that be? Easy. The important part of the novel is not how the characters get from point A to point B, but what happened before point A and how they feel about reaching point B. So let's get to the plot first. Recently widower Mike Noolan, a best-selling romance novelist in the same vein as Paul Sheldon, do you remember him? We talked about Paul, is suffering a horrible writer's block after the death of his wife, Jo. The fact that Jo died pregnant, and he didn't even have a clue that she was expecting, tortures him to the point of panic attacks if he even tries to open his word processor to write fiction, partly because he subconsciously blames writing to him not paying attention to her. Emails and short notes are still possible, same as handwriting, but he is not willing to try to write a novel handwritten as he fears that he will also lose that chance. Driven by nightmares of Jo, he moves to their summer house, a lake cabin in the town of TR90, named like that for its coordinates because it's an unregistered town which is apparently very common in the United States. The cabin is called Sara Laughs in honor of the most famous inhabitant of it, a 1902 singer named Sarah Tidwell, who never recorded an album but was still considered a huge influence in music from then onward. As if the change of air had been what he needed, the writer's block slowly disappears, even as he starts getting weird information about his wife, because apparently she traveled to Sara Laughs a lot the year before her death, something that he had no idea had happened. And then he meets Mattie DeVore, a very young widow, and her precious daughter Kyra, a 4-year-old at the very most. They're having some problems, because Mattie's former father-in-law, Max DeVore, is fighting for the custody of Kyra. And although he is older than dirt, he's also very rich and powerful. While Mattie, well, she finished at high school, but not that long ago, and is living in a trailer park. Spurred both by Max DeVore calling him to threaten Mike if he helps Mattie, and a strange presence in his house asking Mike to help her, Mike decides to use part of his own considerable money to hire an attorney for Mattie. But of course, now he also has to deal with the fact that he accepts that Sara Laughs is haunted, and he needs to figure out by whom and why. I said that there were two stories in Bag of Bones. The story of Mike Noolan, which is the one that we are privy to, and the story of the secret of TR90 and Sarah Tidwell, which is a complete secret to Mike and, by extension, to us, until it may be too late for him to do anything about it. So, let's start talking about Mike. Mike is one of King's most common archetypes, or artist, who is also tasked with saving the child, as most artists are. In this case, our child is Kyra, more about her later. And well, Mike is a writer. Only that, unlike other King writers, he is not really battling with alcoholism, which, in my opinion, is a breath of fresh air in that regard because I was getting a little bit tired of the drunk writers. Another thing about Mike is that he's far more interested in sharing tips and tricks about his writing process than any other writer was before. Even more than Paul Sheldon, who had literally nothing more to do than to think about his writing process. So we get interesting moments where the story just
stops, for the lack of a better word. Stops when Mike is far too busy in the fictional world of the novel he manages to start writing, a novel that we do not get to read, as we at least got to read parts of Misery, but that's a complaint for a different thing. And that means that months pass without us knowing what's going on at TR90 with Mattie and her problems, or if there is any more news about the hauntings on Sara Laughs, where Mike is living and having nightmares. Because he's too focused on his writing to think about everything else, and so he actually sometimes tells us, oh yes, there were a few hauntings, but I was too busy writing. Not that Mike doesn't understand how this could be frustrating for the reader, who is, of course, more interested into what's happening around Mike, or even frustrating to himself as he remembers. In fact, he constantly blames himself about not having noticing the secret life that his beloved Jo had been leading for at least a year before her death, precisely because he was too absorbed in the book that he had been writing at the time. The actual last book he'd write to be published, because the one that he wrote in Sara Laughs gets destroyed. And the one that we're reading, well, it may be in first person and it may be an amazing read, but I doubt that any publisher in Mike's world would want to actually publish it as is. In fact, we can think that part of his writer's block is guilt. He claims it started when he finished that last book and broke a ritual he had with Jo, where he asked her to write the very last line of each one of his books he had written. However, he had no other choice, as he had finished it after she had died. And given how he only manages to start writing again once he listened to his dreams that are very heavily implied to have been sent by Jo somehow, to point him in the direction of what she had been doing before she died, and moves from Derry to TR90, even considering moving there permanently at some point, we can even consider that his newfound writing ability, with an old typewriter instead of a computer, because our good old king is nothing but a technophobe when it comes to these things, is because he finally listened to her and started paying attention to what she was doing. Sadly, this also comes with a horrible suspicion that he has that maybe Jo was having an affair, since he finds out that she had quit all her volunteering work, traveling constantly to TR90 and Sara Laughs without telling him what she was doing, and at some point Mattie mentions that she actually saw Jo with another man. Mattie is, of course, a point of conflict for Mike. She's far younger than he is, about 26 or so even if he is attracted to her and she to him, he fights this attraction for as long as he can. But he can't just stay away from Mattie as the constant threat of her ex-father-in-law, and he's sure that the ghosts of his house are trying to get him to protect Kyra, so he has to see Mattie, because they only got active, the ghosts I mean, when he started talking to them, and even started leaving him cryptic messages in the form of messages with Fritz magnets that all point to Kyra, help her, and coordinates that also have to do with, well, how to give those messages without the main ghost of the house finding out.
As the story of Mike in TR9 advances, we get small glimpses of the story of the town, specifically the beginning of the 19,000s. This means because Mike's wife, Jo, was a bit obsessed with the story of Sarah Tidwell, the first owner of their summer cabin, a great jazz singer who never recorded anything in her life but was covered to hell and back after she disappeared from history. A little after Mike realizes that his house was a bit haunted, he talks with his caretaker, Bill Dean, and hears about how Sarah and her band were invited to Darkscore Lake to perform in a festival and stayed for a while, creating a small community. However, Mike becomes quite uneasy when he realizes that Bill, whom he honestly liked and saw as a friend more than as an employee, is low-key racist as he talks about Sarah and her band who haven't lived there in decades, who just wanted to live in peace as outsiders, with more than a little contempt, without actually using any slur or derogative word. Why Sarah left TR90? Well, her son Ray Jr. died from a terrible illness, or so the locals say, and thus it sorted the whole place for the family, that one day just packed up and left, as those folks tend to do. Bill words, which cue Mike to his racism, not my words. Thanks to a far chattier housekeeper, Brenda Messerve, Mike finds out a different story about Sarah's son, this time named Quito, who drowned. But at first, he doesn't pay much attention to the different names nor the circumstances, because, well, old town legends can change from person to person that tells a story. However, he also hears that Bill's twin sister, Clara, died drowned in the lake during a terrible fire caused by Max DeBoer leaving town, and that there was another kid, named Kerry Auster, who was drowned under a water faucet by his father, Normal, before Normal killed himself. Although Mike points out the irony of a man named Normal doing those things, he soon finds himself distracted by both his book and the Matty DeBoer situation, so he doesn't really pay attention to it. Except, not long after he finds out about Bill's sister's death, and has a very upsetting dream about Sarah, Tidwell, Joe, and Matty, Bill warns Mike about not asking questions about the town, and tells him that although everyone loved Joe and were sad about her passing, they weren't happy about the questions that she asked, and that he should not keep asking the same questions, nor getting into the Boer's business. While Bill is mostly sympathetic to Mike, the warning is clear. And that is when Mike starts trying to research the same story that Joe was. But, well, the people in town are not really happy about it. Mike, in fact, gets a warning from Bill. The people would be very unhappy if this is about a book that Mike is writing. While Mike has absolute no interest in writing a book about Tier 90 and Sarah Tidwell, between the insistence that he shouldn't dig on the past and the obvious ties of whatever is hidden in the town's past and what is going on with the DeBoer family and what was Joe investigating before his death, well, he can't stop digging then. And the truth? Boy, the truth is a doozy. See, the reason why there is such confusion about the name of Sarah's son is because she had two kids, Quito and Reg Jr., and both died in the Terry 90, and both were victims of racist violence. A little after Sarah's last concert, Max DeBoer's grandfather and a group of his followers harassed Sarah, angry that she dared to ignore him and walk around town as she was one of them. Their words, not mine. And then, since there were no witnesses around, they raped her. Except there was one witness. John Quito had been looking for his mom and found them right in the middle of the act. So DeBoer and his gang chased him and drowned him in front of Sarah so that he wouldn't talk. And then, because they knew that she would be listened to since she was famous, even if she was black, they killed her too and buried her bones with her son near the lake. Which is, of course, why there is no information about Sarah after her husband and the band left the TR-90. As I said, they buried Quito and Sarah, but Ray Jr. suspected that they had killed his mom and brother. And when he got too close to the truth, they arranged an accident where he got caught on a bear trap and the wound got infected, so he died of an illness. And that's when Sarah's husband realized the danger that they were in and left town. But Sarah left a legacy, a curse, because every single one of the men who raped and killed her and her son had children, which they named with a K starting name, either written or phonetic. And then, once that child was about 6 years old, they killed them, drowning them. And their surviving children kept that horrible tradition, no matter what, driven by an impulse that they did not understand. That is the secret of TR90. But now, the question is, what does that has to do with Mike and his wife? Bag of Bones is incredible as I read. It's paced slow and the hauntings are at first rare, almost harmless. You could almost even think that they are just Mike's imagination. But as the story progresses and you realize how much foreshadowing was put in before, it becomes a roller coaster. The best part, for me, is that while Sara is, at the end of the day, one of our villains as her revenge has caused innocent children to die, she is never blamed or seen as evil. In fact, it is mentioned that she in the end was also influenced by something dark that took advantage of the very justified rage in her soul and then corrupted her. The problem was not her desire for revenge, just the target that she chose. Being dead, she had no way to move on from that rage and anger, but those who are alive could have chosen to be different from their parents. Those who did helped break the cycle. Those who didn't, well, we see the results in the end. I want to thank my dear patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, Jessica, and Ellie Riley, as well as my first supporter, Tania Pineda, and Amy Song, who is the best person in the universe, and without whom these videos will not exist. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects, and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Adalisa, read the link on the description as I know my name can be hard to spell, and with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos as well as get access to a ton of art before anyone else. Or, if you prefer a one-off offer, a coffee with just one donation of $3, you will get mentioned in the 3 next videos I make. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, and of course, you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. As we set down our weary bones, I'm afraid that we still have a bit more to walk. But this time, our companion is a young girl who may have taken a wrong turn precisely in the TR90 forest. The girl who loved Tom Gordon.